Aging is inevitable, but contrary to what we've been told, we have a choice in how that takes place. Jeff Bergholtz is an avid hunter and trainer and is here to discuss what he's learned at the age of 60 that is applicable to all of us as we get older and want to be able to continue to hunt, shoot, and compete to the best of our ability. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I'm your host, Scott Volquartsen, and this week's guest has a master's in exercise physiology. He recently won the 2022 Mr. Tennesee Masters over 60 division, and he is the president, founder of Takes Two Fitness personal training and coaching studio, located in Nashville, Tennessee. Jeff Bergholtz is also an avid hunter, outdoorsman, and former professional champion turkey caller. Welcome to the show, Jeff. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for making the time. I know you've been busy. I know you just got back from an elk hunt, which, as we just talked about before we started recording, came off the heels of your bodybuilding show. So you've been busy and putting your body through a lot. But before we dive into a couple different things, can you just give us a little background on how you got into the training, the fitness, even hunting? You know, you mentioned you were a college football player, but if you can just give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, like a lot of kids, I was an athlete. In high school, I wrestled and played football. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and my father was an avid hunter, second generation hunter. And believe it or not, a lot of people think, you grew up in Florida and you're a hunter. They see Florida as the Gulf Coast or the beach. And so Central Florida is kind of like Georgia. There's a lot of rednecks down there. So we were on a big hunting lease, cattle company, the Mormon property for years. And so, when I was 8 years old, I think I shot my first turkey. And so we hunted hogs. And so that was a big part of my life because that's where my father and I connected. Being a football player, I dreamed to play college football and all the workouts that kind of came with that. I had an older brother that was a college swimmer, and he put weights in my hands at 12 years old, and I fell in love with lifting. And we had the old concrete weights and plastic weights, and we made it work. But I ended up getting a scholarship to Western Kentucky University, which is in Bowling Green, Kentucky, about an hour away from Nashville, where I live now. And when I went there, basically it's rural, and so I was able to keep my hunting up. And they're in the Conference USA, their Division I program. At that time, they're in the Ohio Valley Conference, still Division I. And, we had a strength program. Wasn't very good back in the 80s. It was nothing like it is now and how sophisticated it is. But I was able to continue when I played football up there with my love of hunting because it was so rural and it was easier to get permission on lots of big farms in Western Kentucky. And so I continued to hunt and my love for the outdoors. When I started out measuring in, my major was in PE, and at that time they were kind of sophisticated, kind of branching out to kinesiology and exercise science. So I kind of headed in that direction because I love the whole lifting game. And when I graduated, I went further west to Murray State, which is another Kentucky University State School, Division I school, and got my master's in exercise phys. And at that time, there was no personal trainers. There was no coaching that you got paid for at that time. I guess it was mid 80s. I graduated in 85. There was only like Nautilus instructors and, things of that nature. But I ended up graduating, and I had some physicians that contacted me and helped start a racquetball club of all things in Kentucky. And during that time frame, I put some strength equipment in and basically gave my knowledge away and started helping people for free. And did not make much of a living at that. So as it evolved, I ended up, leaving there, going further west in Kentucky, starting a wellness center for the state park system. And it started to evolve that people wanted help and people could see the value of help and would actually pay a couple dimes for your advice. And so from there, I entered Nashville, and I actually started cardiac rehab program for a hospital with strength training. And, from there, it just continued to evolve into the point where 22 years ago, I started my own thing called Takes Two Fitness.
So how have you seen, like in those 22 years since you started that, how have you seen like the evolution of like the gyms, the training, does it become an issue? Because it seems like there's so much information online now. Do you have to, when people come in to see you, do they already have like a premeditated idea of what they should be doing and you have to overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's pros and cons to technology and to both of those things. One is people come in with a preconceived idea that I've had ladies bring pictures of this is who I want to look like, who have, a completely genetic different body type. There's different body types that people have, and there's Sheldon's body types of mesomorph, ectomorph, endomorph, and they'll come in and want a tall, pretty thin woman's figure, like all of us want to be perfect, and they're robust and they need to lose weight, and it's not attainable. So on some side, the negative side of it is sometimes I have to calm people down, and we have to come into some kind of realistic view of what we need to do, and we need to back up. On a positive side, people are a little bit more educated, so they know a little bit about what a macro is, a macronutrient. They know a little bit more about food. They've read some stuff on the internet, or they've joined some kind of a monthly program where they've seen some workouts. And so it's not as green to them when they enter the facility. The underlying issue that's always constant is that people still, I don't care if they buy a program online, if they have a coach come do an at-home session, the issue that I still constantly see is people's lack of motivation and discipline and accountability. That's an underlying thing that I probably wouldn't be making a living at this if people had that conquered.
And I think you bring up a great point, because with all the information out there, if it was as easy as just knowing what to do, we would all be in perfect shape and obesity would not be the problem that it is in our country.
Absolutely.
But I think there's so much more. I had Tony Blauer on my podcast, and we talked about this before we started, and he talked about the difference between like a trainer and a coach, where a trainer will, can tell you what to do and the right macros, the right workout, but a coach will actually dive into what's holding that person back from achieving those goals. Even once they have the knowledge, is it a story they've told themselves about they can only look a certain way, or is it something going on at home? Is there,
right?
And you mentioned that. How does that work? Or I guess how much of a component of that is in your training and coaching that you have to get to know the person and what makes them tick?
It's another excellent question. That is absolutely a key component. Because I'm getting people from the private sector from age 25 to 76. And before COVID hit, I had a lot of 85-year-old people that were training with us. And people are like, how did you get all those mature people in there? I said, well, just be open a long time. We're all aging together. So when I opened up, I was 38, and now I'm getting ready to turn 61. So, a lot of my clients have been here 20 years, but getting inside the head of a person and understanding them, what their pitfalls are, I have a lot of people right out of the gate will go through an exercise phys report, which is kind of a small evaluation, medical intake. We look at good fat, bad fat. We do some symmetry measurements and then some performance-based things. And then I interview them about, what they feel like, what some of their downfalls are, if it's sweets or Diet Coke or whatever. And what I find out about most people is they lie. Not intentionally, it's a blind spot, but they are not really honest with themselves or me, because I'm a brand new guy in their life, a coach, on the first 3 months. And then as I get to know them, and you get tight with people. That's why they call it personal training. Is I get to know people about their family life. I get to know about, not just their limitations and weakness, but their hobbies. And so as I get to know them, more things come out. More things come out where people say, I guess I should tell you that I I don't do it a lot, but I have M&Ms during the day. And I said, well, how many or how much? Or, they start to be more transparent with you, which is a lot easier to fix when they start to become upfront. The other factor is some people have a greater capacity for intensity than other people in the private sector. Now, we're not dealing with college athletes, where it's like, hey, everybody needs to learn to suck it up and Navy SEALs and be intense. We've got people coming in here that have a lot of money. Some people don't have any money. They've saved their money to do this. A lot of people, they want to be in great shape. They want to have better cardiovascular. They want to pass their treadmill test with their cardiologist, but they have this soft button inside of them where they're real delicate and tender, and they've never really been pushed. And so I think, going back to your original comment from Tony Blauer is, a coach and a trainer, you got to blend the two. I can do great programming, and I have a lot of guys that work for me that are great programmers, but they don't have the ability to see three-dimensional and get somebody to be successful at that program when they run into their barriers and things that slow them down. Like maybe they're a little soft inside. Maybe you got to learn how to motivate them with not just kind words, but some other tools of accountability. So yeah, as you get to know them, there are definitely things that come up and that make it very, very challenging.
So on that, let's say you have somebody that does have a lot of money and they just want to get in great shape, but they have, like that soft button that you called it. Does it just come with experience on how hard you can push that person before they just up and quit?
Before they break.
Before they decide this isn't for me, or I'm going to go find somewhere else that's going to be easier?
Yeah. That's a good thought. I think the first thing is I try to build a rapport with them. I try to gain their confidence that, you just can't start. If I started with you and you were giving me shooting lessons, I'd have to know you cared about me when you corrected me. If it was all correction and reprimand on my form, my breathing control, but if I started to see, hey, Scott really cares about me, he really wants to help me. And some of that is just getting inside of somebody's head and encouraging them, and also being a cheerleader for them. I always tell everybody, a private sector personal trainer coach is basically a counselor. They're not just a coach, but they're a counselor. I mean, I don't know if I've saved a lot of marriages or cost a lot of marriages, but I have listened to lots of people's problems, which is normal. And I love it. I love people and I love that part of it. But I'm also a motivational speaker because I've got to be able to motivate this lady who's never been an athlete, who's overweight, and she wants to quit every Friday to come back next week. So there's so many small moving parts to it. But once you get inside their head and you build that trust, then I start to see success with people. And so that's where I know that the sweet spot is when do I need to let up a little bit. Okay, we had a really hard workout on Wednesday. Today we're going to do more of a recovery workout and maybe work on some dynamic flexibility and soften up just a smidge so I can buy her back, this lady back on Monday, or this man back on Monday to push a little harder.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and you mentioned, prior to COVID, you had people that were in their 80s and, some that were older. So speaking of the age thing, I got to dive into this. What at the age of 60 made you decide that you wanted to get back into competitive bodybuilding?
I wish I knew. No, my wife thought I was crazy.
Well, because what I was going to say is I've seen people that have done it, for the first time, maybe not knowing what it took.
Right.
But you had already been there, so you knew the sacrifices you were going to have to make and then some because you were older this time.
Absolutely.
So, walk us through that and how the decision making and once you decided to go all in, how that looked.
Yeah, thanks for asking that because I keep a diary once in a while. I'm not very good at it, but I've really taken a lot of notes down from why I did it, what I learned in the journey. And I'm glad I did it. It was hard as hell. I'll be real honest with you. I did it. Okay, so my story is at 21 years old, I was a senior at Western Kentucky, and I won Mr. Kentucky at 21 years old. I was the youngest guy at that time to win an NPC. That stands for National Physique Committee. That's the governing body for amateurs, not the IFBB, which is the Mr. Olympia, the pro guys. And so I at the same time, I was, starting these fitness centers. I loved lifting, and I competed, and it was hard. It was hard as heck, but I was a big guy. So, I already had a lot of muscle mass from playing football. Then I did a few more shows, and then I quit for a while and, was starting my life. And so my peak year was at 37 years old. I was Mr. Tennessee when I moved to Nashville. And it was very hard, the discipline and the diet. I love eating. So I can handle the 5-6 meals a day, but the cleanness of it was tough. So when I decided to do the comeback, I think that it was 25 years to the date, but it was in August in 1997, 25 years later. I turned 60. So it was a benchmark for me. I'd had my knee replaced at 52 from football, had my hip replaced at 56. So I had this new body. I was able to run again and train harder with some of those joints that hurt. I still had a torn rotator cuff, but I thought, man, I'm going to compete again. And it's not like I started fresh. I train 4 or 5 times a week because I'm in the fitness business. So it's a part of my job description. I love to work out, and I work out with clients. I work out in the afternoon. So I was in shape, but I wasn't very big. An average bodybuilder, they usually, the old bulk up, trim down. They start at 230, 250, and they cut down to 210. They carry a lot of muscle mass. I was, walking around, as a 6-year-old guy at 200. And I was like, man, I don't have a lot to lose. I mean, I had a belly, because you get fatter around your waist with visceral fat as you age, just hormonally. But so I thought, man, I'm pretty lean. It's going to be easy this time. I'm not going to have to lose 30 pounds. And boy, was I wrong. So I did a 12-week diet, and going into it, I also think too, as you age, you have memory loss. As you get older, you're like, man, I ran a marathon when I was 26, and I'm 46, so I'm going to run another marathon, and your training is going to be totally different. You got to make adaptations. Your knees are different, your ligaments are different. So as I entered into this thing, I wasn't changing as fast as I was in my 30s or 20s, and I had loose skin. So my skin was looser. My complexion of my skin was different. I'm fairly lean most of the time, about 10 or 8%. And so I was losing nothing at all, but my muscles looked like they were depleting and not my fat. So it was opposite of what I wanted. So I really had to step it up and really suck it up. My training was harder. I started creating like 2-a-days where I rode the bike in the evening time. I did about 2 hours in the morning of hypertrophy training, which is just lots and lots of sets and reps. No big heavy movements like deadlifts or squats, because I had to work around my 2 joint replacements. That made it challenging as well. So I lost a lot of leg size because of those. So I thought, I started looking at pictures online of 50 and 6-year-old guys, and they tend to be skinnier, obviously because of their age. And so I thought, man, I'm just going to go in super lean. So I got really strict on the food plan and the diet. And as it got closer, like I said, for 6 weeks, I'm very social. My business is very social. I have a lot of friends from the business, go to football games. Nashville is a very, very social town. And so, I have a vodka drink or a tequila drink. I've learned how to drink clean and not gain weight over the years. And so my wife and I will have a dinner date. So I was, I had told you earlier before we started, I was drinking, not a lot, a couple times a week at a dinner or something. But I kept that up the first half of the diet, and my waist wasn't coming down at all. So I'd hired one of my guys to help me with accountability weekly with my food. And he said, man, I know you don't want to hear this. You're trying to do this, but kind of almost half-ass it. You're going to have to quit drinking. And that was, you think, well, that's not that hard. But, I'd have a glass of wine or something with my wife. I had to take that away for about 6 weeks. And then my waist finally came around and I got thin enough. I went into the show at about 188 pounds. I think I started at 203. I felt like I'd lost too much, but so cutting the carbs the last 2 weeks, and this is just for people listening, in bodybuilding, you decarb, you take all your carbs out toward the end, and you cut your water. They call it drying out. And it's dangerous, of course, and you basically dehydrate yourself about 4 days out while you're cutting carbs. So for about a week span, you're like a walking skeleton. You feel horrible. And I was still able to coach, 6, 7 hours a day and do my admin stuff and work and run my business. But I couldn't wait till I started to carb load. And then you carb load, but you still keep your water at a low, which makes your skin thin out. They call it drying out. And they basically call it feathering, where you can see all your striations and your vascularity. And so that was extremely hard. And that's when I wanted to quit. I thought, well, I don't have to do this. I'm 60. I've come this far. And that part, I really wanted to quit. But I hung in there. I had a really supportive wife who thought I was crazy, but I still did it anyways. And, once I got there and, you carb load, you feel better and pumped up. You're allowed to have some sugars and things. I started feeling a lot better. But I would say the hardest thing for me was the discipline. But it also showed me a couple things about people that are my age and clients that I worked with. One is your body's much different as you age. And I think we have this mentality because of social media and the internet. I know I do. When I look on Instagram, I'm like, why don't I look like that guy anymore? It's because you're 61 years old. I train just as hard as that guy, but he looks so much better. And so we have this mentality that you can't go backwards, but you can be the best. You hear people say this all the time about anything in life, the best version of yourself. And that's what I was able to do. I didn't look as good as I did, in my 20s and 30s, obviously, but it was a good life lesson for me that, things are much harder for an older adult. They have hormonal issues. And I'm proud to say that, I've monitored a lot of different blood serum hormones during the contest. And I am on TRT. I started TRT when I was 50. I had the testosterone of a girl, and which was none at all. And so that's all I did. I didn't use any anabolic steroids, so I could say I was natural. But I was on TRT, and I had about a testosterone rate of about 750. 750 is what I was producing. And so that helped me a lot. I couldn't have done it, without the testosterone therapy, but I have been using that since I was 50, the last 10 years. But for me, the mindset and how different your hormones are, how different your body is, my skin, everything was just much harder. And so, I got up there and there's only like 3 or 4 guys in it. And I wondered why. It's because it's hard as heck, so as the divisions got older, you started out in the open and there'd be 15 guys in it. And then you moved to the 35 and above and there'd be 6 guys. And as it got closer to 60, it was 3 guys. And then in the 7-year-olds, there was nobody. So, my wife said, why isn't there anybody in the 7-year-old? And I said, they all die by then. So anyways, it was great. And then the recovery time, I dieted back out of it. And the interesting thing was to add to my challenges this year. So I got done with the show August the 13th, and I had scheduled this elk hunt about a month later, around the 15th, 16th of September. And as soon as I got home, I started getting back to normal. And of all things, I got COVID. So I got COVID, which wiped me out after losing all that weight in bodybuilding. And so I had really about 3 weeks to get my cardio back up for the elk hunt. But it was such a challenge, and I was blessed I got through it all.
So when you finish a competition like that, do you have to resist the urge to just kind of go off the rails when it comes to discipline and be like, you know what, I was so good for so long, I'm just going to enjoy things for a while?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I was in my 30s, last time I did it in 1997, I was, basically a kid. Same thing in my 20s. I ate pizza and brownies and drank beer. And I remember I got so sick. I was sick with an intestinal type twist that I just couldn't hold anything down for like 8-10 days. And so I had learned, and that you got to diet back out of that. You can't. That night, I think we went out with a bunch of couples, and I had 1 slice of pizza, and that was enough. And I tasted a little bit of Coke. And so I went back on the diet. I added some cheats in there, but real slow, like pancakes with a little bit of syrup, a little cheese on an egg. And so, I'm back up at about 205, my natural weight that I walk around at, a little bit thicker around my waist, but it's really easy to overdo it because, you're extreme on one end to the left, and it's easy to overcompensate as soon as you're free to eat what you want. A lot of bodybuilders will get in a bad rut where they gain a bunch of weight because they just can't stop.
Well, I think you mentioned you wrestled when you were younger, and obviously being from Iowa, high school, college wrestling is a huge thing.
Absolutely.
And you see that, and granted, they can get away with it because they are a little bit younger, but, they make it through the season and they're so restrictive that as soon as that final match takes place, you see a lot of them binge, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And make up for lost time. And then you'll talk to guys as they get older, it becomes tougher and tougher every time they have to cut back down to weight.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you think going through this at the age of 60 made you a better coach? One, because your clients saw that you were willing to put the work in to go through it. But secondly, you mentioned that you had forgotten how hard it was. Did it serve as like a reminder of, what these, like you said earlier, what these clients are going through and how hard it is to stay disciplined?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Both of those. For me, it made me a lot more sympathetic because, it was so hard. I couldn't get the body fat down, and it is a crazy sport. You get, when you end up, a guy ends up competing, he's about 4% fat, losing his water. It's a dangerous level, but it's for 24 hours. I've been able to get out of it and been okay. I've never been a lifetime bodybuilder where I wanted to go on and be a pro and be in the universe and the Olympia and the American, all that stuff. But so I had enough of it to really help my fitness career, and I liked it, but it's so demanding. I didn't want to keep doing it. But with clients, it gave me a lot more grace. I understand why your metabolic rate changes so much. And that's really what I saw. I was eating 250 grams of protein a day, very clean on my macros. Most of my carbs were from really solid vegetables like asparagus, broccoli, some fast burning carbs like jasmine rice and Yukon Gold, yellow potatoes, things like that. But still, the weight wasn't coming off. And so when I see these people struggling, they don't have the athletic background that I have, they don't have 30 years in the gym, you have a lot more compassion for them. And you're just trying to show them that they can make change and get a little bit of results. The other thing that, one of my pet peeves is when I hear a 25-year-old trainer telling a 65-year-old man to intermittent fast, and if you just do all this, you're going to get six-pack abs. And the irony of that is, my kids, I have 3 boys I raised, they all had abs and they ate pizza and lasagna. So, it's not fair. A 25-year-old guy trainer can't tell that to a 65-year-old man because they have no idea. They've never been inside of that body. They've never had that slow metabolism. Calories go so much further as you age. And I've seen that with myself and with clients. And so, a young kid's metabolism is on fire, and they can eat anything and still have really thin skin and low body fat. An older adult, it doesn't work that way. Every once in a while, I'll train what we call a genetic freak, but very few times there. Even those guys who have some ex-athletes, they have their issues of age that they face. The other thing that it did for me, Scott, competing again, it was really cool. It put a bunch of my average coach that works for me here, about 15 coaches, is 35 to 40. I have a few 25-year-olds. But my coaches, male and female, rallied around me, and it really motivated our gym. We live in Nashville, and it was 2.5 hours away in Chattanooga, and I probably had 18 people drive down, which I said, please don't go. It's not a big deal. I'm an old man. It's just something I want to do because I'm 60. And they all came down and supported me with their wives and husbands, and that was heartwarming, but it just put a new energy in the gym that, if Jeff can do it, we can do it. And so wow, now I'm not just the founder of the club, but I'm actually an example for everybody right now. So that was really cool.
Well, and I think it's showing leadership from the top, like in the perfect example of what leadership at the top is. Right. Not just telling people what to do, but showing it. And I think, Jeff, there was a lesson that you mentioned in there that I think applies to everywhere when you were talking about you had to have a coach tell you that maybe you have to give up, the weekly cocktail for the last 6 weeks.
Right.
I think we see it whether we're looking at business, diet, nutrition, whatever. We think we're doing everything right and not seeing results. But in reality, if we were to scale back, hire a coach, and have them audit us, we realize there's stuff that we're doing or times that we're taking a little bit easier road, and then we justify it in our minds, and then we complain that the results don't match the level of effort we're trying to put into it.
Right.
I think we're all guilty of that. And something I want to ask you along those lines is the one thing that I know a lot of people struggle with is, as we get older, we want to be social, we want to go out, we want to have connection. And so much of that involves, being out, having a drink, doing that. How do you balance the discipline of what you've done versus like the social aspect of it?
Great question. That's always a challenge. One thing that's interesting in my business, I'm very, very blessed that a lot of my clients have become my friends. And what's cool and I'm in the city of Nashville. I'm in Midtown near Vanderbilt University, and I have a lot of clients that are very high profile people in this city and in the country. I have a lot of clients that, we get invited to dinners and shows and things. And so socializing is a big part of my business. In those relationships. I trained the governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, for his 2 terms. He's out now and Governor Lee's in, and I always wanted him to run for president. I thought I could have been a trainer in the White House, but that never happened. So anyway, so that's an example of the client base that I have. We've trained a lot of entertainers here, lots of famous songwriters that, I could name drop and you'd know the songwriters and songs. So I have to go to certain things, once or twice a week. And so, I have this whole thing that I teach clients how to drink clean. We hear people talk about how to socialize clean. I'm not a big drinker, but I like a cocktail. I like to go to dinner with my wife and, try a martini and then have a nice steak. And so I don't tell people unrealistic things. You can't with the adults that I train. It's not like an athlete, like, hey, there's no drinking the next 8 weeks and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, they own their own business. They have a family. Some people, like I said, a lot of people here in the music business, entertainment industry. And so I try to teach clean drinking or clean eating, all together as one thing. And so what I teach people is, obviously you go to the doctor and he says, okay, do you drink? You have 2 cocktails a week. Most people lie and say, yeah, I have 2 cocktails a week. Sometimes it's 2 times a night, 2 cocktails a night for some people, but I'm not that bad. But my point is, I tell people a couple times a week and, try to come up with a wine spritzer. My wife and I are big advocates of a wine spritzer. She taught me about that. I didn't even know what it was, and trying to dilute your alcohol down where you still have, carbonation. I drink vodka or I drink tequila. I drink clear. I teach people that the bourbons and the darker alcohols, the scotches, carry a higher calorie, the carbohydrate conversion into fat. And so, soda water and a vodka and put more soda water in it. If you want to sip on a cocktail and you're at an entertainment thing that you have to go to with clients, you got to, I love a beer, after I mow the yard or work out. But I don't do beer all the time because I tell people, a lot of guys drink the IPAs and all that. You wear your beer, and so it's a decision that you have to make, so, and then you can, abstinence, it works for some people. And I've gone to some cocktail parties and I've just had soda water and lime in it. So I think you just have to make that decision. If it's a downfall for somebody, then they might want to dig deep and try to, a lot of my clients will not have a cocktail for 30 days just to kind of reset and then go back into a more realistic schedule where a lot of my clients that are very, very social in the entertainment business, they only have a cocktail on the weekend. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Monday through Thursday or Sunday night through Thursday night, they don't have anything. And I think it's good for your body. It's good to reset better for your sleep, and it also keeps it in check. So that's a great question, because it's really, especially in Nashville. I mean, this is like one of the entertainment capitals of the world.
Yeah, because I've been there a couple times, and it definitely is. And even like, whether you're out hunting or, in our industry, we're at trade shows and everything, so many times it just seems to go with the territory.
Yeah, right.
So I was interested in how you did that. And like I said, especially living in Nashville, where it seems obviously there's something social you could do every single night of the week.
Right. Absolutely.
So shifting gears a little bit, you said you've had your gym for 22 plus years. On the business side, what are some things that you've learned, some mistakes that you've made over the years that, we can't go back and fix them, but that if you were talking to a new business owner, that you would advise them on?
There's a lot of things. My degrees were in exercise phys and kinesiology, and so I had very little business classes. I've told my boys, I'd said, if you headed into this industry, any industry, at least get a minor in business, so you kind of know what a P&L worksheet is, or how to create a budget, or how to raise capital. For me, I went through the school of hard knocks. I always had a big personality, so I was able to talk to people easy. The social side and the relationship marketing side is easy for me. The number side and being frugal and learning how to stretch a dollar and cutting costs and things like that has been a challenge for me. We really thought we were done when COVID hit. It is an amazing miracle that we made it through. And I contributed to loyal customers. I had, they closed Nashville down for about 2 to 3 months. And in the beginning, if you remember, in the beginning, it was all over the internet, all over CNN, and that health clubs were the worst place.
Yeah.
That you were going to get COVID if you went to a health club. And so it crushed me.
And I think I read your facility, it's a large facility, 6,000 square feet, correct?
Yeah, we're about 6,500 feet, and we are loaded with equipment.
So a lot of overhead.
A lot of overhead. We're in, there's a lot of buildings in Nashville that are being built right now, but we're in a Class A green building, one of the number one spaces in the city. And we're real blessed to be here. So, when all that happened, I quit paying everything. And, but I will say I had some precious customers that had been with me over a decade that started funding me, started sending me, Venmoing me money. And man, I was like, gosh, don't do that, guys. And I love and appreciate. I had people paying me for training that weren't even training. And I said, I'll come to your house. I'll do whatever. And I said, we just don't want you to close the club. Don't close the gym. And so between that and the PP&P money, we weathered the storm and we came out of it. And, I met you at Winter Strong, and we what I did when we came out of it is I took some of the PP&P money, because we were making money again, and I invested and renovated the whole business in Sorinex. And that's, kind of the relationship how I met you, because I love the whole Sorinex, not just their equipment line, which I learned about years ago at a strength conference, but I love Bert Sohr and his story, his love for the outdoors and what a leader he is. And so I was just pumped to redo the whole club. And now we have a whole new energy, a whole new crop of people. It just kind of revived my business. It was a perfect thing to do after COVID. So it was awesome.
And in some ways, as you went through that and you had clients sending you money that you weren't even training at the time, did you become aware a little bit that maybe what you're doing is even bigger than what you thought? That obviously you're having an impact on these people's lives, that they're willing to send you money. And at that time, everything was pretty much uncertain across the country.
Right.
That these guys were willing to send you money for services that you couldn't even render at the time. Did it give you a realization that you had much more of an impact on them than maybe you even realized?
Yes. And I think that's what keeps me in this industry. People go, how can you get up at 5:30? I start every day at 5:30, Scott, with clients. I have doubles and triples and numerous people. We do a shared session. Now I double book myself every morning at 5:30. People say, how can you do that? Get up at 5:30 and grind like that. And I'll do 7-8 hours in a row before I'll sit behind a desk. And I think it's that it's not just getting people in shape. It's the depth of the relationship and the lives that I've seen change. Being a part of Takes Two Fitness, being a part of what my wife and I started, and some of the relationships that we've built, some of the people that have become my close friends, but more so some of the lives that have changed, where some of these people, they're off of drugs. They're 20 pounds down. They love fitness. I see them training in the park outside of their session with one of my coaches or myself. And so it's really neat. It's a very gratifying industry to change people's lives, through wellness, through strength training. And so, yes, that really showed me that it was more than training, because it tore me up, that the people that supported and helped us make it.
Well, that's pretty cool. And you brought up, a couple of minutes ago, brought up Bert Soren, and he's a guy that I've learned a lot from on the connection side, the building relationships. And it sounds like that's something that you've always done pretty well. But the other thing that, before we started recording, that you brought up on Bert is when you got introduced to the Sorenex community, it was kind of one of the first times that, your two worlds had melded together with fitness, hunting, and, kind of bringing that all together. What are some lessons that you've learned, whether it be in the field or in the fitness world, that you can kind of take to the other? Like we talked about, even being in the gym and learning to control your breathing is very applicable out in the field and different things. What are some other lessons that, you kind of see parallels between the two?
For me, it's, hunting and fitness, or hunting and strength training, conditioning is synonymous. And you want to have a better hunt and get in better shape. You want to be consistent, whether you're chasing turkeys or you're high in a deer stand. It's the same thing as being consistent in your workouts. For me, especially with a aging adult, when you're young, you can, again, youth, you can pull a bow back, you can hike all day. When you're older, you got to be in condition. And so I think I was telling you, when I was a professional turkey caller and I did shows for the call company that hired me, and was sponsored by Realtree Outdoors and some of those guys, that nobody really, there was a few guys, but this is back in the 80s, 86, 87. A few guys made fun of me. They called me fake muscles. And I would say, why do you say fake muscles? And they said, well, you've never cut tobacco. You've never farmed. And you're right. I was a city boy that lived in the country. And so I got it. I understood it. And so when I decided to go with Sorenex, and I really researched what Bert was about, my wife said, oh my gosh, honey, you found your people. And it was guys that were athletic and lifted and conditioned and hunted really hard, and the two blended together. And so for me, I was real excited about that. But, back in the 80s, everybody wasn't, some of the great callers, Harold Knight, and I love those guys, and Dick Kirby and Paul Butsky. None of those guys were lifters, so.
So, and I know we're up a little bit against time here, because you have to, like you said, get back on the floor and train people. But one of the last questions is, what are some of the common traits that you see from people, like for those that achieve their goals versus those that maybe seem to be more stuck and not able to get to where they want to go? Is there like certain traits that you see that you can take and try to apply to some of those other ones?
Yes, absolutely. Right out of the gate, after, 6-8 weeks working with a new client, I can tell if they're going to succeed or not. Some people get into this cancellation mode. The first time it might be oversleeping. The second time might be I'm too sore. But I see that pattern of attitude coming out, that they're going to fail. And it's not because the programming's wrong or the workout's too hard. It's just that they really struggle with that kind of accountability. The thread of success that I see, and these are people too that are not necessarily former athletic people. Those guys do really well because they've got some discipline, but just, I say, lay people that really haven't done sports, but they want to lose weight and they really want their wellness to get in check. They want to pass their physical with their physician, is being consistent and having the ability to be held accountable, being consistent and showing up. That's the first step. And people ask me all the time, my wife's a coach and a trainer as well. They ask us a lot. They'll say, hey, what's the best exercise? What Scott, if you could pick one thing, what would you do? And I tell people all the time, I said, one thing, the thing that you will do competitively, the thing that you will do over and over consistently. If it's riding a bike and you love riding a bike, then ride the bike 3 or 4 times a week. You know, if I like to run in the park, then run in the park. So the best exercise is the one that you will do. And so people are looking for you to say bench press or power cleans or, you know, and it's really, you got to find what your niche is. Now, obviously, physiologically, you got to have some strength training and cardio mixed together.
And do you find that even like with people's diets that, you know, people want to know, is keto right? Is high carb, low fat? You know, all these different things. Is carnivore diet right? Do you find that it's more just being consistent and finding what works for the individual and one that they can, like you said before, something that's realistic and they can stick to versus some, you know, extreme that after 2 weeks, they're going to fall off?
Absolutely. Another great observation, great question. It sounds like you've thought through some of this stuff, Scott, because I tell you what, absolutely on nutrition. Here's how I teach nutrition. There's a new diet every week. I have people come to me, have you heard of the Whole30? Have you done, you know, I've done the keto. Have you heard of keto bread? And so here's what works for me. Here's what I found out. And I tell people what, you know, outside the bodybuilding diet, that was totally different. But my day in day diet, because I start at 5:30 in the morning, is I intermittent fast. I'm one of those guys that gets out of bed and I'm not hungry. And so like a lot of businessmen, when I get in front of people, whether you're doing a presentation or you're doing a Zoom call, I'm on the floor coaching, I'm in front of people. I'm not hungry. I'm teaching. I'm teaching with passion. I'm teaching with knowledge. And so I don't eat until 1 or 2 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday. So I intermittent fast. And then when I eat, I try to use some portion control. I eat pretty much what I want. Now, I'm not going out and eating pizza every day, but, you know, I'm still eating, you know, if I have to grab something on the go, it'll be a grilled chicken sandwich. It won't be a fried chicken sandwich. So, and then what I do, and I really believe in this, and I actually did this in my body. I was going to tell you, the nutritionist, my guy that works for me, John, that helped me, we cheated once a week. Even in the bodybuilding contest, he said, you got to do this to reset your metabolism. And so I still cheat one day a week. It's usually for Kathy and I, my wife, it's Sunday. We like a big brunch. We like huge omelets and pancakes and a mimosa and, you know, coffee. And so for me, it's Sunday. I will pretty much, you know, eat what I want, kind of nibble all day. I won't crush it, but I'll eat what I want that day, and then I'm back on intermittent fasting with pretty clean eating. So other people, they can't do that. They have to have breakfast, and so I tell them, eat breakfast. You know, I'm kind of over that. It's the most important meal of the day. It actually is, and when you break a fast, breakfast stands for break fast. So whether your breakfast is at 6 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, you're still breaking your fast. It's just the amount of hours that you slept or you want to go without eating. So I'm not on your show to talk about intermittent fasting, but that's what I do that works for me. I know a lot of my guys do keto. That works for them. When I do some of that stuff, I get in deprivation and then I closet eat. I know my vices, you know, and so I will find sweets and then I'll do that if my calories aren't right. But for me, I don't restrict myself. I just watch what I eat, and I eat in a smaller window. But that works for me. I think you're exactly right. Nailed it. You got to find what works for you.
Well, I think back to your earlier point, I think that's what's so important if you are trying to achieve certain goals of having coaches, whether it's a business coach, a financial coach, you know, whatever is important to you at that time, because it's really hard, I guess, to look at it objectively sometimes, and a coach can be like, hey, you know, when you were doing, you know, try this or do this, and you get that outside eyes on what you're trying to do, and it becomes much easier. And then there's that accountability part of it as well.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. You know, and it's not, none of this stuff is easy. If it was easy, we'd all be walking around in perfect shape. And that's why, I make a living at it. It's tough. And there's a lot of weeks I need to be coached. And again, that goes back, that's why I decided to do bodybuilding this year, to just kind of push reset and kind of get my head right and redo some some things that I teach every day. And so, yeah, it's not easy. There's not one fix for everybody. But I think that if I leave your show today, I would say, and you hear this from a lot of coaches and a lot of trainers, the two things that you got to have is consistency, and you got to be willing to have something, somebody, some way, some accountability, because I cheat in my workouts. That I'm tired and I don't want to push. So it's nice to have a partner. You know, when we created Takes Two Fitness, it was a partner gym and personal training. In fact, you could buy a membership here and we would partner you up, because I really felt like, you know, we kind of based it on that Bible verse that says two are better than one in Ecclesiastes because they have a greater return for their work. If one man falls down, his friend can help him up. So it really is a true principle from the beginning of time that two people do better. And so I think you got to be consistent and you got to have accountability partner at some point.
I think that's a perfect way to close this, and great advice for anybody, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, whether it's in the fitness world or something completely unrelated. Where can people find you online? And do you have, I know you have Instagram, it's Strong 2 Hunt, correct?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And that's Strong, then the number 2 Hunt. And then do you have online presence or social for Takes Two Fitness? I do.
And we basically have Takes Two Fitness is one. I think it's Takes Two Fitness TN, Tennessee, TN.
Okay. And yeah, we'll find those and make sure we get them posted too when we post this.
Okay. Absolutely.
And if I have time, Jeff, I'm going to be in Nashville next weekend. I may have to give you a call.
Hey, please do. I'd love to grab a bite with you and show you the gym and maybe catch a workout.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I'm going to be there next Friday, so I will be in touch on that.
Okay, Scott.
Well, thank you again, Jeff. This has been awesome, and I appreciate it. And you guys, the one thing that I want to get across from this is so many times we tell ourselves stories that we're too old to start something or too old to do something. Jeff has proven that age really is just a number. You may have to make some changes on how you do it, but if you're willing to put the work in, we're never really too old to start anything.
Absolutely. And one thing, Scott, that a great book, if you know, I read the book probably 10 years ago, and I have no endorsement with this book. No, it's just, you know, you read. It's called Younger Next Year, and it was written by a guy named Chris Crowley and Henry Lodge. But one thing they say in the book that I've kind of made my mantra is age is inevitable, but decay is not. And so as you're going to age, we all age, but decaying doesn't have to be a part of age. And so it's how you live your life. And people were built to move. They were built to exercise. They were built to enjoy life. And so I think it's a mindset. You could just say, you know, I'm getting old. I can't do that anymore. Or you can say, age is just a number. I'm not gonna live in a state of decay or atrophy. I'm gonna live in a state of hypertrophy and get better.
Oh, and I love that. And I think you touched on it earlier. You know, these people that have lost 20 pounds through you, or maybe cleaned up their diet or quit drinking as much, whatever it might be. Yes, it helps you from a physical standpoint, you know, your appearance and all that. But I think the thing we didn't touch on is it'll help in all areas of life. You have more energy to hang out with your family, your spouse, your friends. You know, you have more energy at work. It's much more than just, you know, the physical appearance part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, especially as you age too. I mean, you want to stay functional, you got to move, you got to train, you got to work out. I mean, I see other guys, you know, I could talk to you for hours. This is so enjoyable. I love it. And it's, you know, you're in my wheelhouse right now. But I just got back last year from my 40-year high school reunion, and the amount of 6-year-old men that played football with me, they were homecoming king and all, they looked horrible. They had let themselves go and done nothing for 25, 30 years. And I'm like, my wife was like, I just can't believe it. I said, that guy, man, he was a running back. He was a stud. And she goes, he looks horrible. He had a big belly on him. And so the difference is you got to decide how you want to age. You got to decide if you want to decay or if you want to get better. And I think it's a personal choice.
And like you said, it's a choice, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to require work. But in my opinion, it'll be well worth it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Jeff. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and we will get this, we'll get all your Instagram and social posted, but thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me. I really loved it.
Thank you. And as always, thank you for listening.